The championship round of the fantasy football playoffs is here, and whether or not you're grinding it out for that ring, whether or not you're in that consolation bracket and you got to avoid that punishment, the waiver wire is the only place to significantly improve your team and potentially find a league winning player or a player that you can find to plug and play in your lineup this week in fantasy football. So let's get into it. One of the last waiver wire videos of the year here on Blitz Sports Media. What's going on, everybody? I'm Blitz Link, and without further ado, I appreciate all you guys tuned in throughout this entire year. Hit that subscribe button for more of this content throughout the offseason and next season. But let's get into it. Michael Carter for the Arizona Cardinals. He was our number one priority heading into last week. He remains our number one priority this week heading into week 17. He's emerged as the Cardinals lead back after Bam Knight went down with a season-ending injury in week 15. Carter carried the ball 14 times for 56 yards, while adding 4 catches for 38 yards and playing 80% of offensive snaps. He followed that up in week 16 with 11 carries for 65 yards against the Atlanta Falcons, but didn't see a single target. It was interesting because since week 11, he's been averaging about 3 targets per game. This past week, the Arizona Cardinals passing game was kind of, held in check. Jacoby Brissett had a bad game. Trey McBride had a bad game. So a lot of those Cardinals players were held in check. But this week, I think it is a strong bounce back opportunity for Carter, who faces these Cincinnati Bengals and maintains that priority carry share and target share in the backfield that you want. They've allowed the most rushing yards to running backs this season, and they've really struggled through the air at times while allowing receiving backs to have that production. Like, look at Devon Achane last week, had a monster game with a few splash plays. Jalen Wright even got mixed involved there as well. The Bengals have just struggled against running backs. Carter really becomes that solid plug-and-play running back 2 flex option for a lineup that potentially is dealing with a Quinshon Judkins injury or injuries prior this year, or even a tough matchup in that situation. So Michael Carter, a great add on the waiver wire. The next guy, Raheim Sanders for the Cleveland Browns. No, him and Shough are not related, but Sanders comes in as the Browns lead back following Quinshon Judkins' gruesome ankle injury he suffered. Dylan Sampson and Jerome Ford are currently hurt right now, so Sanders operated as that primary back, logging 11 carries for 42 yards and adding a 4-yard catch against the Buffalo Bills. He was really good at Arkansas in 2022, totaling 1,440 rushing yards. So he's going to be in a volume-driven role if Sampson and Ford can't go. This week, it's a brutal matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but there could be people just looking for that volume and a floor in fantasy, and I think Sanders is that guy. His ceiling is probably 14 points, but he's probably a guy that sees 15 to 20 touches if Sampson and Ford are not able to go in this Browns backfield this week. Next guy is Tyler Shough, New Orleans Saints quarterback, who's been very good as of late. One of the most impressive players, I think, that's flying under the radar. He's only rostered in 18% of leagues at this point, and he's scored at least 17 fantasy points in each of his last 4 games. He's completed passes on 67% of them with 7 yards per attempt. And he's added some good rushing value as well, 135 yards and 2 touchdowns over the last 5 games. He's been force-feeding Chris Olave, and Olave had a massive week. This week, he gets another favorable matchup in the Tennessee Titans, who are allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the quarterback position this year. True fantasy goldmine, good matchup. Shough has a good floor paired with it. Expect him to have a strong streaming quarterback performance. I prefer him over another option at the streamer position. Shough is going to be right around that top 12 for me in week 17. The only wide receiver that has consistently been on and off this list more than Parker Washington, right, is probably Troy Franklin. And both these guys are mentioned here, but we're going to start with Parker Washington for the Jacksonville Jaguars, rushed in 23% of leagues. In week 16, he caught 6 passes for 145 yards against the Denver Broncos, and he's consistently carved out the 3rd wide receiver role in Jacksonville in 11 personnel snaps. A lot of the Jacoby Myers trade thought Parker Washington was going to take a dip. That hasn't necessarily happened. Washington's had some really good games this season. He's had 8 catches, 90 yards against the Raiders, 5 catches, 71 yards, and a touchdown against the Cardinals. He's just been having these monster games, and Trevor Lawrence clearly has a good connection and rapport with him to where they're consistently having fantasy football production. In week 17, those Jacksonville Jaguars get the Indianapolis Colts, who have been really bad through the air. They're missing Sauce Gardner and Charvarius Ward, and they've allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers this year. So I think Parker Washington is once again in play this week as a strong streamer. The next guy, Troy Franklin, I just mentioned him. He's a strong streamer this week. He's been in and out of the cut list of this waiver wire video over the past few weeks because Pat Bryant has emerged as the second most valuable receiver in this offense. He was playing the second most snaps, second most routes run, and Troy Franklin's value has taken a hit because of that. Troy Franklin's production over the last 2 weeks has been directly tied to Pat Bryant being on or off the field. Outside of that, he's really struggled, but he did have the middle of the season stretch where he was incredibly strong. He was averaging over 14 points a game. He was scoring touchdowns left and right, and he was playing the second most snaps in this offense. Now, with Pat Bryant out with injury, he is going to get right back into that role. He currently ranks third in the NFL in deep targets and eighth in red zone targets this year. They're facing Kansas City, who just lost to the now 3-12 Tennessee Titans. They rank 18th in pass defense DVOA and bottom 10 in sacks this year. So with Troy Franklin, he is going to return to fantasy relevance this week, and he had 84 yards against the Chiefs in week 11 right before the snaps changed between him and Pat Bryant. So expect Troy Franklin to return to fantasy relevance this week. Blake Corum's the next guy. Corum has been on fire as of late. He's just been exactly what this Rams offense needed. Next to Kyren Williams, he's averaged 82 rushing yards per game over his last 4 games, and he scored 5 touchdowns during that stretch while also averaging 7.5 yards per carry. He has been great with his limited production. He's been a touchdown dependent but efficient RB2, and he scored at least 13.1 points in 4 straight games. At some point, we just got to say throw this guy in our lineup, and it's this week that I'm throwing him in some of my lineups against the Atlanta Falcons, who are allowing the 13 most fantasy points to running backs this year. The Rams are heavy favorites in that matchup, and I expect both him and Kyren Williams to have a good amount of volume on the ground, leading to a nice day in fantasy football. The next running back is Chris Rodriguez Jr., who automatically re-slotted in as the team's primary running back after missing week 15 due to injury in week 16. He had 63 rushing yards and a touchdown against the Philadelphia Eagles. He played 28 of Washington's 54 offensive snaps. Jeremy McNichols, primary third down guy, played 15 snaps, and then Jacory Krosky-Merritt, after a strong week, only played 11 snaps after that. Rodriguez, over the past month, has consistently earned double-digit carries, and he scored 10-plus points in 2 of his last 3 games. They've got the Dallas Cowboys in Week 17, who had the 7th most points to running backs this year. They've significantly regressed when Quinnen Williams has been on or off the field. He was off last week against the Chargers. They couldn't stop a nosebleed, so Williams misses again. Expect Chris Rodriguez to be in for a nice day in fantasy football. A wide receiver that I'm super high on this week, if he goes, is Luther Burden, currently only rostered in 16% of leagues. It looked like the timeline for Rome Odunze is going to be week 18 against the Detroit Lions. Burden has been Chicago's most productive wide receiver from weeks 9 to 15, 23 catches for 308 yards, and he won the role, or Olamide Zaccheaus, in 11 personnel snaps, winning that slot role. And even with Rome out, he maintained that slot role when Rome was out, and Zaccheaus slotted in the outside. DJ Moore has been really hot as of late, but Luther Burden, when both were on the field, was the more explosive option of the two and had more first read targets than DJ Moore did. They get the San Francisco 49ers in week 17, who allowed the 3rd most receiving yards and 2nd most receptions to slot receivers. So if Luther Burden suits up this week, I think he's going to be in for a very strong performance in fantasy football. The other running back we got, a lot of running backs on this list, Jawhar Jordan for the Houston Texans, currently only rostered still in a little bit amount of leagues. He's carried the ball 15 times for 53 yards and added 5 receptions for 17 yards in that 3-man backfield that Houston deployed this past week. Even with Nick Chubb healthy, he had the advantage in terms of snaps played. This was coming off a 101-yard performance the week before, but he failed to replicate that efficiency here against the Raiders this week. The volume's encouraging, but the Chargers are just a much tougher matchup overall this week. If you are desperate for a volume-driven play, Jawhar Jordan's your option at the running back position this week with that tough matchup. I have him more down my list, but he's also a guy that has that volume, so I think some people might be targeting him a little bit higher. The tight end I got is Taysom Hill for the New Orleans Saints. With all the running back injuries between Devin Neal, Alvin Kamara, the Saints implemented the Taysom Hill give him the ball strategy. He logged 12 rushing attempts, had 4 receptions, and even threw a touchdown a pass in this game, really cashing in on the Taysom Hill tight end advantage, even though nobody played him this past week. He also ran a route on over 40% of pass plays. With all the injuries New Orleans has, they're finding different ways to get Taysom Hill the ball and exploit these defenses. I already mentioned that Tyler Shough has a great matchup against the Tennessee Titans. The same applies to Taysom Hill in this one. His versatile Swiss Army knife roll with a lot of the injuries they have. Expect him to get involved and have a very good day in fantasy football, especially if you can plug and play him at the tight end position. In standard formats, he's a no-brainer for me at the tight end slot, and you got to find a way to get him in your lineup to have some success. As far as my top streaming defense goes, it's the New England Patriots. They're going against Brady Cook, who has 4 interceptions and 11 sacks taken in his 2 starts for the New York Jets. The Patriots have been a really solid fantasy unit, scoring double-digit points in 4 of their last 7 games. So make sure New England is your priority for the defense. As far as honorable waiver wire mention goes, this list is a little bit shorter this week. Quarterbacks, you got Aaron Rodgers, Cam Ward. Both are playing at a very high level over the last 3 weeks. Running backs, you got Emmanuel Wilson and Audric Estime. Wilson, right? I think Josh Jacobs played. He's clearly banged up right now, and his efficiency is dipping. Wide receivers, you got Adonai Mitchell, continues to be this team's wide receiver 1. Mac Hollins has been much better as of late. And then the tight ends, you got Colston Loveland, Colby Parkinson, both volume-driven guys. Parkinson let a lot of people down in week 17, but should be in for a nice bounce-back performance against the Falcons this week. And then defenses, the Giants and the Cowboys, great matchups. And then Eddie Pinheiro has been on fire as of late for the San Francisco 49ers. As far as guys I'm dropping go, Baker Mayfield, he just has not been the same player, even with a healthy group of weapons. I trust him not at all. I would rather play Tyler Shough than Baker Mayfield this week. Quinshon Judkins, Jordan Mason, Kamani Vidal, all suffering from injuries. I don't like their outlooks the rest of the way. Kareem Hunt, no role whatsoever with the Chiefs eliminated. Jordan Addison has been brutal. Then Rondé Gadsden, same story, has just really struggled over the past few weeks. Guys that I'm not dropping yet. Jacoby Brissett, one bad performance is not going to deter me away from a guy that's been very consistent throughout the entire year. Brian Thomas Jr., Mecca Agabuka, just don't drop him. Just leave him on your bench. Christian Watson, one bad game. Once again, not going to deter me from him. And then Mark Andrews, been very volatile, but does have that touchdown upside down the stretch here for the Baltimore Ravens. All in all, though, guys, good luck in your fantasy football championships. Drop those waiver wire questions down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this content, hit that subscribe button for more Blitz fantasy football content, and I'll catch you guys next time.